My ex-boyfriend invited me to his wedding, clearly hoping to flaunt his rich new fiancée in front of me, but the surprise came when my plus one completely flipped the script in a way no one saw coming. Back when I was 24 and still juggling college and a part-time gig at Starbucks, I met Marcus. He was 32 at the time, also working there while trying to chip away at his significant car loan and credit card debt. I was saving every penny I could so I could finally move out of my parents' house and start living on my own. Marcus's situation wasn't easy either. His parents were deep in debt because of their gambling, so he couldn't count on them for any kind of financial support. We first clicked by talking about our messed up family situations, but over time we genuinely started enjoying each other's company. It wasn't just shared struggle anymore, we actually liked being together. 2 years later, after I graduated, I had enough money saved up to move into my own place. It felt like such a big step forward. Marcus, meanwhile, was still stuck living with his parents, barely making a dent in his debt. I could see how hard he was trying, so I offered to let him move in with me. But the reality hit pretty quick. His finances were still a mess. He couldn't even afford half the rent. So I told him I'd cover 75% of it and he'd only have to pay the remaining 25%. He agreed without hesitation. As for the utilities, we split those evenly. At the time, we both had different kinds of jobs. Mine was a marketing analyst role with the flexibility to work from home whenever I wanted as long as I hit my monthly targets. His job was more physically demanding and required him to be on-site for long hours. Because of that, he wasn't around much to help out with things at home. Most of the daily chores, washing dishes, doing laundry, cleaning, cooking, ended up falling on me. I didn't complain at first. I knew his job was draining and I tried to be understanding. The one small thing I asked him to handle was taking out the trash, especially since he usually ate after me and was the last to finish. But even that seemed like too much for him. No matter how many times I reminded him, I'd wake up to find the trash still sitting there, so I'd end up dragging it out myself every morning. I remember one weekend in particular, I had to work on a Saturday, and when I got home, the apartment was a complete disaster. The kitchen counters were buried under dirty dishes and food wrappers, laundry was overflowing, and of course, the trash hadn't been touched. I was furious. I'd just gotten off a long shift, all I wanted was to sit down and unwind, but instead I spent hours cleaning up the mess. I hoped maybe Marcus would at least notice the effort when he got home. When he finally walked through the door, he gave me a hug and said he missed me, but that was it. He didn't comment on the clean apartment, didn't thank me, nothing. He just plopped down on the couch and turned on his game like everything was fine. That was the breaking point. I broke down crying right there. I wasn't sure if it was the exhaustion, the frustration, or just finally hitting my limit, but in that moment it became crystal clear how little he appreciated me. He turned around and asked what was wrong. I wiped my eyes, told him I was fine, and said I was heading to bed. Before going, I reminded him again to take out the trash. He nodded like he always did. And like always, the next morning it was still there. When he walked into the kitchen and asked me what was for breakfast, I completely lost it. I told him if he was hungry he could figure out his own meal. He looked at me like I'd slapped him and accused me of being rude. That's when I snapped. I started yelling, telling him how useless he was around the house. He blinked at me, confused, acting like he didn't see the problem. He even told me I was overreacting. I took a breath and asked him straight up, "Why is it so hard for you to take out the damn trash?" He just shrugged and said he forgot. Then I asked him what exactly he contributes to the house, aside from coming home, sitting in front of the TV, and drinking a beer. His excuse? He was always tired and deserved to relax after work. I told him I agreed he did deserve time to rest. But what about me? After my workday, I was still cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, even ironing his shirts for the week. And all I'd ever asked was for him to take out the trash. That's when he said something that really hit me the wrong way. He said he never asked me to do any of that. He told me his job was hard, and as his girlfriend, I should understand and help him out. He even tried to justify it by saying his mom used to do all of that for his dad. I was fuming. That was the moment it really clicked for me. I had let myself become a doormat in my own home. And we weren't even married. I looked him straight in the eye and told him I wasn't his mother. We were supposed to be equals, and I was done picking up his slack. From now on, I told him he'd be cooking his own meals, doing his own laundry, ironing his own shirts, taking out his own garbage, and cleaning up after himself. He looked stunned and started to argue, but I raised my hand and shut that down quick. There was more. I told him if he wanted to stay, he had to start paying half the rent. No more 80-20th split. If that wasn't something he could handle, then he needed to find somewhere else to live. He looked at me like I was a stranger, asking where all of this was coming from. I told him I was just done giving so much and getting nothing in return. Before he could say anything else, I walked out. I was already late for work and, frankly, I didn't care to hear another excuse. That was the first time in my life I set a firm boundary and I didn't feel an ounce of guilt about it. From then on, I only cleaned up after myself. It actually felt good watching him scramble to find clean clothes or try to iron a shirt in the morning. He refused to do the dishes or take out the trash, probably assuming I'd cave eventually. But I didn't. I got takeout so I wouldn't have to use the kitchen and I made sure my own space stayed clean. He tried to talk me into being a good partner, again, expecting me to go back to doing everything for him. But I stood my ground. When rent came due, I paid exactly half and told the landlord Marcus would be covering the rest. Of course, he lost it. Came at me yelling, demanding that I go back to paying most of the rent like before. I said no. I reminded him how ungrateful he'd been when I was doing all that. I told him flat out I was finished carrying the weight for him. Marcus tried throwing around excuses, but at the end of the day, he had no choice but to cough up his share of the rent. Even then, not once did he apologize. Not a single sorry or even a moment of reflection about all the times he'd taken me for granted. He never acknowledged the work I did or the effort I put in to keep things going. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, just the fact that he couldn't see where I was coming from. I look back now and think, man, I should have seen the signs way earlier. But I didn't. And over the next few months, things only got worse. The arguments were constant, and he started blaming everything on me, twisting situations to make it look like I was the one being unreasonable. He tried to gaslight me into going back to how things used to be: quiet, accommodating, easy for him. Then came the promotion. I got a step up at work, a big moment for me. And I guess that was the final straw for him. One of our mutual friends, who also happened to be my coworker, must have mentioned the good news to Marcus because that night turned into the ugliest fight we ever had. Marcus stumbled in late, clearly drunk, and shook me awake, saying he needed to talk. He reeked of alcohol, likely from celebrating with the same friends who had congratulated me earlier. I asked if we could just talk in the morning, but he kept pushing, saying it was something important. Half asleep and annoyed, I sat up just to get it over with. I asked him what was so urgent that it couldn't wait until sunrise. That's when he started mumbling about how he'd met someone new at work. I knew exactly who he was talking about. Her name was Sierra. I'd seen her before at one of his office parties. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, and came from serious money. Her dad was some big-shot industrialist, and from what I'd heard, the only reason she even had a job was because her dad wanted her to gain real-world experience. Marcus, drunk and completely lacking a filter, told me he was falling for her. According to him, she was a real woman, unlike me. I just stared at him. No anger, no tears, just blank. I didn't even feel hurt. Deep down, I'd already checked out of the relationship. We were barely even partners anymore, just two people sharing rent. He kept talking, going on about his feelings for Sierra, but I cut him off. I told him straight up that I didn't care. If he had feelings for someone else, good for him. I wasn't mad, I was actually relieved. I suggested we break up peacefully and that he start making plans to move out. He looked confused, almost insulted, and asked if I was jealous of her. I smiled and shook my head. Nope, I told him. I'm just glad you found someone. Makes it a whole lot easier for me to let go. That set him off. He got angry, his face went red, and asked if this new confidence of mine came from my promotion at work. I told him it had nothing to do with the job title. I'd just come to see the truth. Over the last few months, we weren't compatible anymore. We drifted so far apart that we were basically just roommates. I thought maybe he'd be relieved to hear me say it out loud, but instead he exploded. He started yelling about how he hated modern women like me, accusing me of flaunting my career and acting too independent. Then he went on to say that Sierra was better than me because all she wanted was to be a wife and mom, none of that career nonsense. I didn't raise my voice. I calmly told him that every woman is different. Sierra might be fine living off her family's wealth, but I valued my career. I worked hard to build a life I could be proud of. If he wanted someone like Sierra, he should go be with her. And I meant that. I told him again, there's no point arguing. He should start looking for a new place, and the sooner he moved out, the better for both of us. That's when his eyes narrowed and he asked how I planned to afford the rent on my own. I told him I'd gotten a raise and could handle the full amount by myself now. That didn't sit well with him at all. He started shouting again, accusing me of rubbing it in his face, bragging about my success. He went on and on about how Sierra had a house of her own, one her dad had bought her, and how I'd never measure up. Then came the most insulting part. He said I needed to change and be more agreeable. According to him, men didn't want successful women, they wanted housewives who knew their place. That's when I'd had enough. I told him to shut up. I wasn't going to keep arguing at 2 in the morning. I gave him until the end of the month to move out. Until then, he could sleep on the couch. He muttered something under his breath, but I ignored him and went back to sleep. Over the next week, he started packing and slowly moving his stuff out. I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. The thought of having the place all to myself felt amazing. But then came his last night. I walked in after work and there they were, Marcus and Sierra, sitting on our couch like it was nothing. I just stared at him. He smiled and told me he wanted to show Sierra where he'd been living before moving out. The nerve. He didn't even bother asking if it was okay. He knew I'd be home. Still, I didn't want to take it out on Sierra. As far as I was concerned, she wasn't the one who'd wronged me. So I greeted her politely. She, on the other hand, shot me a dirty look and didn't say a word back. I brushed it off and went to freshen up. Later, while I was making some pasta in the kitchen, she came in to get a glass of water. She just stood there, watching me in that same judgmental way. I asked her if she needed anything and she just gave me another cold look. I turned back to my cooking, deciding it wasn't worth the energy. I planned to eat in my room anyway. After dinner, just as I was about to head downstairs again, I heard them talking. I froze when I realized they were talking about me. Sierra was laughing, saying Marcus had upgraded from someone who looked like me. Marcus laughed along with her. She asked why he'd even dated me to begin with, and that's when he said something I'll never forget. He admitted he used me. Said I was naive enough to pay for our dates back in college and that I'd even loaned him money when he needed it. He bragged that I paid most of our rent for years and that doing so had helped him save a lot of cash. I stood there completely stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I always had this quiet suspicion in the back of my mind that Marcus might have taken advantage of my kindness, especially when it came to rent, but I never imagined he'd been using me from day one. Listening to him and Sierra mock everything about our relationship, laughing like it had all been some kind of joke, made my stomach twist. I was this close to breaking down in front of them, but I refused to give them the satisfaction. So I walked back upstairs without a word, shut my bedroom door, buried my face in my pillow, and cried myself to sleep. The next morning, the house was silent. Marcus and Sierra were gone. He'd taken the rest of his stuff and officially moved out. I walked around the place, soaking in the silence, and it hit me I was finally free. I can't even begin to explain how light I felt. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I cried again, but this time they were happy tears. I even danced around a little, just thrilled to have my space back. Then I got to work cleaning every corner, determined to erase every trace of him from the house. In the weeks that followed, I started enjoying the peace of living alone. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't walking on eggshells or cleaning up after anyone else. And honestly, I stopped caring what Marcus and Sierra had said about me. I had moved on, at least I thought I had, until 3 months later when one of our mutual friends at work pulled me aside and told me Marcus and Sierra were getting married. I was caught off guard. It all seemed so fast. My friend even showed me the engagement photos. They looked over-the-top happy, all smiles and staged perfection. I felt a tiny sting, not because I missed Marcus, but because it was a harsh reminder of how long I'd been blind to the way he used me. Still, I reminded myself that I never would have been truly happy with him. In some strange way, I was glad he'd found someone else. It gave me closure. That evening, when I got home and checked the mailbox, I found something that made my eyes widen, a wedding invitation from Marcus and Sierra. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake or some polite formality. But then I opened the envelope and saw something handwritten in the corner. Scrawled inside the card were the words, "I want you to come to the wedding so you can see the amazing life I'm going to have with Sierra." It was like a slap to the face. It finally clicked. He hadn't invited me out of kindness. He wanted to rub his shiny new life in my face. After everything I did for him, this was his version of a thank you? I took a deep breath, trying to make sense of what kind of person could be so petty. But instead of crying or getting angry, something inside me clicked. I decided if Marcus wanted a show, I'd give him one. I RSVP'd yes with a +1. And right then, a little plan began to take shape. I opened my laptop and started digging through Sierra's old social media posts. I scanned through every picture and caption, trying to find something, anything I could use. And finally, I found what I was looking for. Turns out, just 6 months earlier, Sierra had broken up with her longtime boyfriend, Landon. There were dozens of pictures of them from high school all the way through college. They clearly had history, years of it. I sent Landon a friend request. Didn't know if he'd accept, but he did. So I messaged him. I was straight with him. I told him I was Marcus's ex and I had a wild idea. I wanted to invite him as my +1 to their wedding. At first, Landon was curious, understandably. But when I told him the whole story, laid it all out, how Marcus had used me for years, how he and Sierra had mocked me, how I'd been humiliated, he actually seemed to get it. And then he told me something I didn't see coming. Landon revealed that Sierra had cheated on him. More than once, actually. And the last time? It was with Marcus. They were still together when she started seeing Marcus behind his back. No wonder their breakup was so messy. He blocked her on everything, even though she tried to stay friends. From the way he spoke, it was clear he still had feelings for her. He was hurt. And when I shared everything Marcus had put me through, Landon was just as shocked as I had been. Hearing him express his frustration made me feel like, for the first time, someone got it. Eventually, Landon agreed to come with me. I could hardly wait to see the looks on Marcus and Sierra's faces when they saw us walk in together. When the big day came, it did not disappoint. As soon as we stepped into the venue, Marcus spotted us and his jaw just about hit the floor. I could tell the second he recognized Landon. He was pissed, but he couldn't say anything with all those guests around. We found our seats like nothing was out of the ordinary. He stormed over to me and hissed under his breath, asking why the hell I brought Sierra's ex to his wedding. I smiled politely and said, just here to show our support. He had no choice but to storm off in silence, shooting daggers at me as he walked back down the aisle. The ceremony began, and when Sierra walked in, I'll admit she looked gorgeous in that flowing white gown, arm in arm with her dad. Everything went off without a hitch, and soon we were at the reception. She must have changed because she came out in a different dress for the party. That's when she finally noticed us. She froze, dead in her tracks. Her eyes locked on Landon, then flicked to me, confused and clearly not happy. She stormed over and asked him what he was doing there, why he was with me. I smiled and said we just wanted to show our support. That's when she got mad. Are you two dating now? She asked, her voice sharp and rising. Landon didn't even bother answering, probably because it was a ridiculous question. He calmly suggested they step outside to talk, away from the crowd. She gave me a nasty look before following him out. I turned and saw Marcus watching us from across the room, tense and clearly rattled. But he couldn't do a thing without drawing attention. The party kept going, but an hour passed and there was still no sign of Sierra. Guests started whispering, wondering where the bride had gone. She revealed to me how Marcus would always be nice to her at work and give her a lot of attention because of their long work schedule. They spent a lot of time together where Marcus would always complain about me and our relationship. He would say how unhappy he was and that he wished he had a better-looking girl like Sierra. She started to sympathize with him and felt flattered every time he complimented her. When she and Landon were going through a rough patch, she got carried away with her feelings and hooked up once with Marcus. After that, Marcus had convinced her to break up with Landon, telling her that Landon was not good enough for her. Marcus would continuously send her messages about how she was perfect for him and that they could have a life together. She felt guilty for cheating on Landon and hence eventually broke up with him. She thought she could be happy with Marcus despite their apparent age difference. Sierra then explained how when she saw me, she was insecure at how independent I was and felt jealous that I didn't really need a man to take care of me. She apologized for hurting my feelings. I understood where she was coming from and went to tell her how hard I had worked all my life to reach this position at work. She nodded solemnly with her eyes down. I then asked her to explain to me about what had happened during her wedding with Marcus. She then revealed that when I brought Landon to the wedding, she was shocked to see him. She realized, looking at his face, just how much she was still in love with him and never felt the same way for Marcus. Landon told me that when they had privately discussed this during the wedding, they realized that they both felt the same way for each other. Hence, they decided to run away together after Sierra left a note for her family. They have been together since that day and were very much in love. I was also informed that she had talked with her parents about this, and although they were very angry at first, they had eventually decided to support her. She was going to file for an annulment with Marcus very soon. Hearing this, although it didn't entirely sit right with me, I was satisfied that at least two people were happy after the disastrous events. I could see how happy Sierra and Landon looked at each other. We had our lunch, talked some more, and eventually left. Since that conversation, I haven't talked with either of them much, nor do I want to be a part of their drama. I plan on focusing on myself and continuing to work hard at my job. I don't know what will happen with Marcus, but I hope that he can eventually learn from his mistakes and not chase after partners for money in the future.